Today we'll be interviewing Charles Boyd, the creative director of Star Wars: The Old Republic, about Onderon's role in the upcoming Onslaught expansion. Hey Charles.
Hello.
So Charles is, much like many of us, a very big lore enthusiast about Star Wars lore. So let's jump right into talking about Onderon and the sources that you had to pull from. So first off, Star Wars has 3 very strong visual renditions of Onderon in Knights of the Old Republic 2, the Clone Wars animated series, and the Tales of the Jedi comic series. How did the developer team use and digest these sources to prepare to create Onderon in Star Wars: The Old Republic?
For me, the Tales of the Jedi was the first visual reference I had ever encountered with it as a fan and stuff. But I'd say visually we really based most of the look of the planet on the Clone Wars animated series, with a bit of KOTOR II stuff sprinkled in, since we're still pretty close to that in the timeline. So, for me, the Tales of the Jedi was really inspirational in terms of kind of, the environment of the planet in a broader sense. It's jungles and monsters and kind of crazy adventures and stuff. And then in terms of the purely visual, mainly, partly because Clone Wars was the most recent reference that fans would be familiar with, but mainly I just really loved the look of Onderon in the Clone Wars. It was, had that great kind of somewhere between Roman, Greek, and Egyptian kind of vibe for their architecture that I thought was really cool, and also in the armor that they wore and their clothing and everything. So for me, that just really, I thought was the coolest rendition of it. And so that's why I kind of went that direction, or urged the art team to go in that direction.
It's definitely paying off as you guys test out the new content and the new planet. We get to test it on the public test server, and it's absolutely stunning. The screenshots that you guys have released so far don't do it justice at all, and I'm really excited for players to go view the planet.
Awesome, thank you. I'm so glad to hear it. Yeah, in terms of like KOTOR II, like we really looked at that a lot for kind of the relative size of Onderon and its moon Duxon, and kind of how those things might look in relation to one another, and some other kind of details like that. Yeah, like I said, main reference was Clone Wars.
So between those 3 sources, we've got some really wonderful sources of existing lore to pull from. In Knights of the Old Republic 2, we meet the strong figures Queen Talia and General Vaklu on Onderon, where the player can choose to help bring the planet into the Republic, or aid the treacherous general in removing the Queen from her throne. In Onslaught, about 300 years later, which of these 2 fates will we see as the canon choice?
Like most things, we generally follow the more light side or Republic-friendly choices from older games as sort of our default. We don't get too much into the exactly what happened to Talia or Vaklu, because I really prefer not to override people's own memories of the game and the choices they made with their character. But Onderon is a member of the Republic in SWTOR's timeline, and there is still a ruling royal family. So to that degree, it would be that the Talia ending was the one that we went with.
So we've sided with Onderon with the Republic, but in Onslaught, what is their central focus of the conflict now that we're returning to the war between the Republic and the Empire?
So there's kind of 2 angles on that. The main thrust of the storyline and what brings players there, both Republic and Imperial, is that there is a Republic fleet that desperately needs to reach Corellia in time for a crucial battle. Sorry, I should say there are several Republic fleets on their way there, one of which is stopping off on Onderon to refuel and resupply before it heads on to the battle. And so Republic players need to ensure that fleet makes it safely, and make sure that the Empire doesn't sabotage or otherwise get in the way of it. And of course, Imperial players are there specifically for that purpose. They're there to make sure that those Republic reinforcements don't make it to the battle, to ensure that the Empire has the best chances they possibly could of victory. The sort of second angle, and actually the reason that the Empire's forces were originally kind of infiltrating Onderon in the storyline, is that Onderon is a really rich resource planet, particularly in terms of its plant and animal life. They're very, very aggressive and very hardy in terms of, like, they can plant some of these plants and these animals in very desolate circumstances, and they'll survive and thrive. So it was something that was established in KOTOR II, that Onderon is really crucial for seeding new planets or new environments on more desolate planets that would eventually allow them to be, habitable and farmable and provide resources for the rest of the galaxy. So the desire from both sides to shore up their resource shortages that they've been experiencing recently in the storyline is what drives some of the Imperial involvement on the planet.
So now that we know the Empire's goals on Onderon, the Republic will very obviously side with the royal family and work with them, but how will the Empire work on Onderon?
Well, I wouldn't actually make that assumption necessarily. For Onderon, when I really came to it, looking at how it was in KOTOR II, the Republic sides with the royal family, the Empire's with the general. And on a lot of other Star Wars properties, I feel like it's generally like royalty good and other people bad. And so I really kind of wanted to flip that around a bit and have the royal family, the royalty, at least the king in this case, who's the central royal figure, be a little more sympathetic to the Empire and be kind of straining against his kind of ties to the Republic and wanting to make new deals, find new ways to profit off of his planet's, vast potential riches outside of the Republic. And so that's what's kind of brought him to start talking with the Empire and start getting involved with them.
Oh, so that's very interesting. So as a Republic player, you're not only going to be dealing with the Sith, but also possibly the royal family as an enemy. That's cool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So jumping back to Knights of the Old Republic 2, when you're exploring the heart of Malachor, if the player chooses to side with Queen Talia and the Republic, Darth Traya looks into the future and sees Onderon shall remain in the Republic and its people will lose its customs. Has this already started to happen only a few hundred years later? How's the city of Isis changed since then?
I think it has, depending on who you ask in the story, right? So there definitely is an element of very traditionalist people on Onderon, particularly amongst a group called the Untamed, which I think we'll probably get into more detail on later. There's definitely a sort of divide between people who feel like Onderon's rightful place is within the Republic, that they should be supporting the Republic, and that the Republic supports them, and that is ultimately Onderon's future and the best way for it to move forward. But there are elements in the society who feel like being a part of the Republic specifically, and even being part of the greater galaxy generally, have been a negative for Onderon. They feel like they're losing their traditions, they're losing what made them strong, and they want to fight to regain those old ways, those old traditions, and get rid of the Republic and generally off-worlders.
So speaking of Onderon's lore and traditions, the Beast Riders are a strong part of the existing lore. Will we see them in Onslaught, or are they a part of this new named faction, the Untamed?
That's right, yes. There's the Untamed would say that they are direct descendants of the Beast Riders. How really direct that is up for debate. But certainly in spirit and in their interpretation of what the Beast Riders were, the Untamed consider themselves their offshoot or continuation. They view themselves as the modern generation of the Beast Riders and still try to uphold what they view as, or what they understand to be having been their traditions. And they're the group that is the most sort of violently against outside intervention and involvement on Onderon and really want to get rid of all outsiders.
Going back to predictions about Onderon, in Knights of the Old Republic 2, on Dantooine, Master Vrook Lamar states that the attack on Onderon was an attempt by something, Darth Nihilus, to use the planet as a source of power. The exile prevents this, but Vrook Lamar states it was a stalling measure. The next time will be critical. Has this critical time come on Onslaught, or do you think there's a greater threat looming in Onderon's future? That's definitely not part of the storyline. I'm honestly not sure exactly what the writers on KOTOR II had in mind when they hinted at that. So, who knows? We could maybe develop into that a little future. I could try to do a little more research into it and see what they were thinking, or come up with our own version of how that could go. But yeah, certainly I think it had to be related to how much vibrant life is on this planet and how little population there is, that it was in some way a really great fuel source for Nihilus. You mentioned earlier that the Tales of the Jedi comic series was your first exposure to Onderon, and there's an extremely in-depth history there focused around the Sith Freedom Nad and Exar Kun. Do we know if there's going to be any cool lore references to those?
Definitely some references. I wouldn't say it's really part of the central storyline. It would be something that fans could come to if they hadn't read the comics from decades ago, as much as I love them and would encourage them to do so. But, so it's not really the central main storyline. Like I said, it's mainly around the Republic and the Empire and the war between them. But definitely a few little cool Easter eggs and references to that stuff in some of the side missions, some of the daily stuff, and other exploration that you might do in the area.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to share about Onderon and the story of Onslaught?
Ooh, no, I'm just really excited for players to dig into it. We've kind of gone back to the sort of separate Republic and Imperial storylines. They still kind of intersect in interesting ways, like one takes place before the other, but the player being, on one side or the other greatly changes it. So the flow of it is really interesting. So seeing that story from both sides, I think will be a lot of fun for players, and I can't wait to see the decisions they make and how things shape out as a result.
Thank you so much, Charles. Players will be able to dig into the Onslaught expansion on October 22nd, 2019. See you all in-game.